Orkhan let Cassandra pass before him, and though decorum dictated that she should not pass before her master, greater still was the insult to refuse his desire. His black claw held open the curtain, and she passed into the light. Moss crushed beneath the toe of her gilded snakeskin shoe. Patches of purple and green lichen stained the jagged rocks that cropped out through the grass. The wild lawn was speckled with small white flowers and spread down the slopes and across the valley. The horizon was raked by the ghostly silhouette of mountains that faded through the distance. "There," Orkhan pointed a long black claw, "that is the source of the Lesser Wyvern River. 7 spires." Past the forest canopy, in a rift in the pale mountain range, the earth reached toward the sky with narrow lithic shafts. The peaks of the stalagmites pierced the clouds, lending to the illusion that this was the pedestal that held up the sky. "And this is our home," Orkhan added humbly as his claw raked the view of the valley below. Pale smoke from tended fires touted from the huts that speckled the slope. Rice and marshmallow were cultivated in the hillside terraces where water swelled in pools still enough to be mistaken as glass. Short, stout figures waded through the paddies, picking at their crops with long, narrow arms. They were hard to distinguish in the distance, but it was clear that they were brownies. Cassandra had seen some once, when she was much younger. Their bodies had always reminded her of the withered elderly, and this impression did not change when she watched them again. Their skin was dark and leathery, but often marked with ink or patterned scars. They always seemed to smile as well, she remembered, in a way that the old smile at the innocent. It was a different smile that caught her eye, though. The worn footpath they followed had passed the amber-hued tent built around the thermal pool, and outside stood Tarakan. He had turned to look back over his shoulder and smiled as he caught sight of the princess returning with Nesu. The shy smile she returned warmed Tarakan from their colder exchange in the tent only moments before. He stood at attention as they passed, but she neither addressed him nor introduced him to the monstrous entities that followed her. The horned behemoth towered over Nesu, a rare sight. The sunlight glistened against the monster's dark green scales. Clutched against its stomach was a smaller, similar creature. Her beguiling smile, masked by her shoulder, made Tarakan long to follow. Without the verbal invitation, however, he resisted. The further they meandered down the path, the more distant his chance of being welcomed became. The disappointment broke his posture, and his shoulders slouched. He waited, watching for someone to turn a glance back to him. At last Tarakan knew he was alone. This had not changed since Cassandra had left him in the tent. After her exit, he soaked away what remained of his drowsiness. The gray tunic left out for him was soft and comfortably light in the tropic heat. With nothing to do, curiosity drew him outside. Moments were missing between dredging through Umza's moat and waking in the bath. Had it been a few hours or a few days? There was no trace of the miles that they had left behind, nor was there a trace of the faces that had been left there. Where was everyone? The vizier walked in the shadow of the demons and princess, and her attention in particular was failing to soothe the loss and loneliness haunting him. Tarakan meandered along a foot-worn path, too distracted by his search for the lives he knew to see the lives around him. Brownies were busying themselves with chores and labors, cackling in their games and rudimentary joy. There were colors, hues of gold and green in their wrinkled skin, browns and reds in the tanned leather swathed across their bodies, aquatic tones in the glaze of their pottery, all of it failing to permeate the stubborn vacancy of the familiar. Without the bearing of time or friends, Tarakan found himself dismissed of purpose. Without purpose, he was a substitute for the person he thought he was. Could he be so dependent? On what he could not quite say, but the lack of clarity did not dismiss the doubt. He tried anyway. It was a spark of ambition, some semblance of personality worth defending. Symbiotic reliance was fine. Military drilling had polished away the youthful arrogance of independence and carved from the conceit a sturdy keystone. He could hold a place in the world, yet his place was being held for him. There was no weapon he could not wield, no strategy he could not plot, no command he could not complete. However, there was no battle here, no fight to win or lose, only conditions, like on any battlefield. His supplies were low. Her attention was not on him, and he was starved for it. What a horrible folly to make. Choirs of voices, some like his old General Brienne or his father's, rang clearly from the depths of his memory. Others, like his mother's being constructed solely by his imagination, harmonized to shame him for his grievous lapse in judgment. How could he have become so entangled in this predicament? Then an occurrence. It was not choirs of voices, rather his own guilt muttering under his breath. He was supposed to hold a place in the world, yet was alone, and this disconnect had boiled over to brim and fume with despair and anxiety, and the voices that haunted him, their concern, whether real or imagined, was an exercise in self-soothing. "Tarkhan!" The voice, familiar and real, forced the captain to turn. "Tarkhan, by black magic!" Karen had rushed at him, her arms tied around his shoulders before he even had a chance to see her face. Reflex bound his wrists around her ribs, but distraction let his gaze fall lazily into her hair. She was here, but where were the others? He checked his remark, however, aware of its self-interest, and pulled her tighter to him. Tarkhan and Karen had never been particularly close. Aware of it or not, Karen was guarded by Draco. Certainly the prince's peculiar demeanor when she engaged others in his presence was enough to kindle rumors. Her arms around him made Tarkhan sick with guilt. Still, he would take the full fury of the warrior prince if it meant Draco would exhume himself from his sandy grave. He choked on his tears, suddenly aware of just how close Draco was to everyone. Draco was keen to him. Draco was keen to Karen. Without anyone else around, they alone seemed to know this pain together. She was not as afraid to display her grief. Her hot tears had stained his shirt and soaked against his shoulder. "Karen!" "Tarkhan!" she interrupted. "Dion, is he with you?" Tarkhan's stomach dropped, and though he longed to follow it, Karen held him in place. She pressed him back, holding him off at arm's length and scouring his absent eyes with her dark, tear-filled gaze. "Dion, Reimu, Tarkhan, please tell me, where are they? Are they with you?" It was almost like a dream now. Scraps of memories were scattered and blown about in a whirling wind, and desperately he sought to snatch them. Quilting them into anything, much less an explanation, seemed impossible. He knew he had been in pain. His shoulders were bruised from supporting the door, and Cassandra's attempt to crack the compact silt that had swallowed him waist-deep had trembled his bones so badly that he thought he might never walk again. The princess was in his arms, he in hers. So many of those moments had no relevance to the sword-bearer or the archer. He could not tell Karen that, though. There was too little compassion in the truth for Karen's delicate constitution. He wound back his memories further. What did he remember? Dion called Cassandra's name. Cassandra welcomed Reimu. Reimu took his place at the door. Reimu took his place at the door. It was a face he had not realized he would not see again. "Karen, Reimu is dead." His voice was plain. His eyes fell short of her demanding gaze. Reimu held off the Fae while Karen convulsed. Her neck could no longer hold up her head, heavy with sorrow. Her shoulders slunk and her elbows tucked tight into her chest as her sobs broke into a guttural whine. Tarkhan caught her before she fell to her knees, and now he held her up, while Cassandra and I fought to get out. "No," Karen quibbled. There was a tremble in her whine, and though quiet, it echoed more loudly than all of Tarkhan's answers. "No. What happened? Where is Dion? If Reimu did not make it, who will watch Dion? Where is Dion? Where's my brother?" "Dion tried to help us, but we got trapped. I do not know what happened after that. I only know by some miracle we are here, safely." "Dion," Karen sobbed, leaning into Tarkhan's arms. "Tarkhan, they were my troop. Draco, Reimu, my brother Dion. Why am I not with them?" "Karen." Tarkhan did not want to say anything, but to answer was more compelling than to leave her in silence. "Karen, I am happy you are here. You are here with us." "Fairies speak! Glamour!" Karen howled. "There is no us. They are all dead. I am the only one left." Daryl, Eloise, these were the first names to echo in Tarkhan's mind. Resolve alone kept him in step with Karen's bitter conversation. "We do not know if Dion is dead yet, Karen. Terakon said. "There is still hope." "I have hoped, Terakon, I have. I should not still be able to hope. My heart should be beside theirs, even when our bones are scattered by scavengers. But no, I am still flushed with pulse, and they are cold and alone without me in our grave." Terakon could only mourn in sympathy as he failed to hold her up any longer. Her ankle slid out from beneath her, and she threw off his arms to weep on her knees. "How can I ever go home again? I would rather die than haunt my mother with my selfish, preserved life." "And Her Majesty!" The dawning thought threw her into a new fit. "Queen Osmara will dye her shawl in my blood in retribution." Terakon knelt beside Karen, cooing her and braving Draco's shame enough to pet her brunette curls. "Her Majesty will do no such thing. I have seen her rampant. You know that I have," he smiled. "Your service has preserved you from any accountability except to yourself. I have seen your valor, Karen. Your tears are pouring with commitment to your troop." The analogy seemed to have delivered a killing blow to Karen's sorrow, though the death was slow. Finally, there was a moment when her despair seemed defeated. She choked back the drying tears and fought to stand with Terakon's aid. Karen remained crutched on Terakon for some time before she found the footing to hold up her own weight. She abated her lonesomeness by keeping one hand pressed against Terakon's chest. He welcomed the sensation as an anchor in the physical, and its distraction from his solitude. "What happened to you, Karen? How did you get here? Did no one else make it?" "I do not know how." There was an exhaustion in Karen's voice. "I went to sleep early and woke up here, alone. Eloise found me." Terakon's heart lit with the sound of that name. He did not have to ask for an audience, as Karen had already taken his hand and led him up the hill. They came over the ridge, and from a distance Terakon found relief in the sight of Daryl and Eloise squatting by a fire. Daryl was the first to see the captain, and there was no doubt in Terakon's mind that his eyes gleamed just the same. Eloise picked up on the arrival a moment later. Too overcome to keep up graces with the brownies around the fire, Daryl and Eloise dropped the conversation without apology to meet Terakon. "Oh, Terakon," Eloise began as she embraced both the captain and a major. Daryl pulled them all into him. "Where were you? What happened?" "We heard you were here," Eloise interjected, "but they would not let us know where. What happened? Are the others with you?" "Raimo is dead," Karen disclosed. Eloise did not have time to grasp before Karen continued, "And nobody knows what happened to Dion." Eloise turned to Terakon. His weak gaze confirmed the somber news. The collective embrace loosened, and they staggered to stand beside the fire. A ring of gray stones were ash-stained and smoky from corralling flames over the years. Eloise clutched Karen and guided her to a seat on a log beside one of the brownies. These were a lazy lot of creatures, whether due to character or age was uncertain, as the wrinkled skin was uniform to the species. For one reason or another, these brownies could sit drinking idly by the fire while the rest of the village toiled in the rice paddies. Terakon could not quite determine what they were drinking. His curiosity must have been obvious. Daryl passed his seat only to grab his cup and offer it to Terakon. "What is it?" Terakon watched his dark reflection lap on the surface of the clear liquid. Daryl shrugged. "Whatever it is, it's fermented," Eloise said with a smile. Terakon sniffed the contents. The scent was bitter and nutty, and singed the roof of his sinuses before slinking down his throat. There was no hint of sweetness. A quick swig was mustered. The flavor seemed to take his tongue in steps, first quiet on the tip, then murmuring, then a ruckus at the back of his throat. The swallow was smooth, and only bit at the base of his ribs. The heady aroma lingered longer in the back of his nose than on his tongue. The lazy warmth did not swim through him for another 2 swallows, which gave plenty of time to catch up with the others. "How long have you been here? Do you know what happened?" Terakon asked, clutching the cup with both hands close to his chest. "What is it now, El?" Daryl started. 2, 3 days? Something like that. Eloise's answer was half-hearted, preoccupied with tending Karen. A brownie with pendulous breasts and an arthritic limp had joined Eloise, tracing her bony fingers through Karen's russet curls. The sergeant continued. "I was passed out from the early morning trip to Caldara. There was this wild pitch whirling in the air that woke me. I grabbed my sword, looked out of my tent, and woke up last night on a hay pile in a stable filled with Krullos. We three found each other long before the Grand Vizier ever showed up to tell us what happened. He saw everything. A demon came and took us away. That was the noise. We knew you and Her Highness were safe, but we still do not know what happened to Shem, Dion, or Nicken. None of them are here? If they are, the Vizier has not said anything about it, Eloise answered. If Ramu is dead, then so is Dion. I know it, Karen whimpered. You were with them, Darrell pressed. What happened? Terracon took another swallow from the cool clay cup. We stumbled across the ruins of Castle Umsa, a fairy princess named Sedwa. The name did not strike his companions as strongly as it had him. She had organized the attack on Damara about 20 years ago. She and some trolls were holed up in the castle. She had taken Cassandra and imprisoned her there. We made an escape, but it failed. Ramu spent his life to spare us some time, but Cassandra and I got trapped. Terracon started to choke up in his review. I do not believe that we would have survived. I think that if they are not here with us now, then they did not survive. A gloom set in over them. Silently they sipped at the liquor. The brownies wore grim masks, but their gossip could not be restrained. First with innocuous questions, then with quiet whispers, and eventually in full chatter. Merrily they kept the cups of the soldiers filled with the alcohol from the leather bladder. Remorse kept the heads of the 4 soldiers bowed in silence.